I found Allison in the dining room and having a seizure, full-blown seizure. She was unconscious, and her arms and her legs were twitching, and she was drooling at the mouth. And it was the most frightening thing to this day that I've ever witnessed.
I woke up in the ambulance, only for a second though. It was like, I don't know, my first seizure. It was a little different than my other ones. I woke up in the ambulance and then I began to have another seizure.
She suddenly had the seizure, which really was a culmination of a bunch of symptoms that were going on several years before that her doctor basically ignored, said, don't worry about it. She was having myoclonus, shaking of her arm or twitching and that kind of thing. I never thought anything of it.
Mom and Dad and the doctor were sitting, and I was laying back in a hospital bed, and they were talking about what it could have been, mild young epilepsy or mild child epilepsy.
She ended up in the hospital at Syracuse with a lot of questions. I mean, they thought it was spinal meningitis. They thought it was all these very strange things that they didn't know at the time because they just weren't sure.
She was put on medicine to control her seizures, and we decided to bring her back to Philadelphia from Syracuse to see a specialist here in Philadelphia before we would let her go back to Ithaca College.
Her doctors that she was transferred to down in Philly put her on Depakote, which was a drug that was for seizures. And she was on that drug for about 3 months.
She had some more seizures. She had 2 or 3 seizures, and she started getting sick. She couldn't walk very well, and her speech was getting slurred, and she woke up and had vision problems.
We drove her down to University of Pennsylvania Hospital, and she could barely walk. At that point, she wasn't even walking. She was stumbling. She was almost comatose. Got her in the hospital and thought, well, okay, she's going to lay in bed and get better. We never, ever thought that she was having a liver failure.
The Depakote that the doctors had chosen to put me on made my insides fail. But when my liver fails, it kind of it affects your other organ systems, and it affected my neurological functioning. It affected my digestive functioning. It affects everything, and so I started getting really sick again. And I went back to the hospital again, and I was there that time for good.
She was admitted on July 4th, 1997, to the hospital, and they admitted her to the neurological floor. As soon as they took her labs, her blood tests, and they got the results, it was obvious that it was her liver that was failing, and they admitted her immediately. They transferred her to the intensive care unit, and she was there for a long time.
I went into a coma for 10 days, and I woke up, and I was paralyzed, and I remember I couldn't talk.
She was in total liver failure. She was in the ICU. She was kind of confused. Liver failure will do that. It'll give you what's called an encephalopathy, where you don't think straight. It affects your brain functioning. Her blood didn't clot at all. Her platelets, everything was metabolically deranged, I think I remember they told me.
Her doctor came in and said that she was going through liver failure and would probably need a liver transplant. Well, that was a blindside and a shock. It was like somebody hitting me over the back of the head with a baseball bat, because it didn't even enter my mind that she might have needed something like that, or that a drug like Depakote could cause something like that.
Well, after about 2 weeks, Allison's body began to give out. She would have reactions when they would give her platelets, she would have these blood reactions where she would spike high fevers and she would have terrible shaking, like when you get sick and you have the chills, but really severe. And so they would try to give her medications to quell those reactions, but she really needed the blood too, or she would be even sicker. So one night on the floor, they gave her packed cells or platelets, and she started having trouble breathing, and that progressed into a full-blown pulmonary edema, which is where your lungs actually fill up with fluid. So they came downstairs and, gave her all of these emergency treatments, respiratory treatments, drew blood gases, got her breathing again. And after everything had quieted down, I felt her, and she felt so hot. And I asked the nurse to check her temperature, and she did. And it was 107.
I went to the hospital and sat with her, and she was out cold, laying in the bed with all this resuscitation stuff on her and IVs and everything else. I think from that point, for the next 30 days, when she finally came back to, she went through a lot of suffering. There were a lot of tough evenings when she spiked high fevers, and they wanted to watch her to see if her liver could recover.
She started losing her ability to talk and to think, and you could slowly see that we were losing Allison. She would sleep for long periods of time, and then she'd wake up and she'd be very restless, and she'd only moan, trying to speak, like, Mom, Dad, but she couldn't get her words really out. It was within a period of 3 or 4 days, a huge deterioration in her health. It was then, after 3 weeks that she'd been in the hospital, that I knew the only way we were going to get Allison back was if she had a liver transplant.
The waiting list is based on the person's blood type, their body weight, and how sick they are. And so the idea is that typically we transplant the sickest people first.
Patients like Allison were given what was called status 1, and that just meant it was an emergency, and they went automatically to the top of the list. Because we knew that those patients, if they didn't get transplanted within a week or two, that they could have brain damage or go into a coma or not recover.
When you look at the waiting list currently, which is well over 90,000 people in the United States waiting for a kidney transplant, a heart transplant, a liver transplant, or a lung transplant. That's a lot of people who are either on dialysis when it comes to a kidney, or patients who may be dying literally within the next 24 hours.
It'd be nice if you could, have choice, but, you're getting offered livers as they happen. So you have to, when the transplant surgeon's called with a liver offer, you get all the information, age and how they died and what their liver laboratory values are. Do they have any history of other medical problems or any infections or things like that? And you make a decision if it's a good liver to transplant or not. And then is it appropriate for the person who's offered at the top of the list, or should it go to the next person or the next person or the next person?
As many as 7 or 8 people's lives can be saved through organ transplantation, because just one donor can save up to 8 people waiting for organ transplants, and as many as 50 more waiting for a tissue transplant, like a cornea or bone or skin or heart valve transplant.
They're always trying to find out what's the fairest way to allocate organs, because there's over 17,000 people today waiting for a liver transplant, and only 5,000 or so will get one this year.
But ultimately, people do die waiting. In this country last year, nearly 7,000 people died waiting for a transplant. So that's 17 people a day.
She was literally 2 days away from dying. And they found a liver.
They got a donor liver, and they came and told us. We were so thankful to that person.
When she said they had a liver, there was a tremendous amount of hope. And Allison, believe it or not, was even in her semi-coma. You could see she was happy.
After that, things started moving very quickly. They took Allison to the OR, I guess about 12 hours after I found out that there was a liver. I think they took her at 4 a.m. They took her in the middle of the night and did her surgery.
I had a hard time waking up or becoming alive again. And so I woke up, I was like rolling around, and the nurse said to me what had happened. And it's really weird to come back into the world and have someone tell you you have a whole new liver. But I was under, I think, such sedatives or narcotics or whatever they were doing to relieve any kind of pain. I think I just went back to sleep. And then after a while, there's a lot of like waking up and going back to sleep. And waking up and going back to sleep. And then you realize, oh my God, how am I going to the bathroom? And then you go back to sleep.
Allison's dad came and stayed, and I went home. I remember crying all the way down the Schuylkill Expressway, driving through this, just realm of tears. And I got home, and I fell into bed. I was exhausted. And I was just tears running down my face, and I started to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, I heard very clear in this dark room, in this house where it's just me, "It's okay." And I sat up in bed. There was no one there. And I didn't feel scared. I had actually a feeling of calm. I went to sleep. And I slept. And I got up early and I went to the hospital the next day. And I got there. And Allison was better.
You could see that these doctors were so excited about being able to perform a successful transplant. And to me, it was just a complete miracle. I can't describe it any other way. So she went back to the recovery room, and she was in the hospital for another 30 days. The 30 days after the transplant were almost as difficult, but emotionally better because it was hope. But recovering from an operation like that is a huge effort. And Allison decided to really give it her all and so forth. And she did. She's a tough kid. That's all I can say.
Allison's perspective on life is definitely changed since she got sick. She's had to deal with things at a very young age that people often never have to deal with.
My priorities in life are a lot more simple. I have to feed my dog, and I have to make sure that I take my pills in the morning. That's a priority. Another priority is that I get enough exercise so I can keep my blood pressure down and keep my legs strong so I can still walk tomorrow. My priorities have become very short-term. Everything short-term in my life.
See, most of us get caught up in earning a living, achieving some kind of material goals. Most of Al's are internal. They're the things that are important to her, the people that are important to her.
She now thinks a lot more about life, what it means, what she can do, why she can do it because of the doctors and her donor. She also thinks about the things she can't do, and that impacts her as well. So she deals with a lot of very emotional kind of issues, and she deals with them very well. She deals it with grace. She has a sense of humor. She loves to laugh. She sees joy in everything now. I don't think before she really thought about the joy around her. It just was. Now she lives in that joyful world. She appreciates friends. She appreciates family much more, I think, than had she not gotten sick. I think sometimes you take for granted these things. Allison takes nothing for granted. Nothing. Nothing.
There are people who have gone through less traumatic stuff than Al, who have folded up their tents and stopped living a real life. Now, I'm not sure why that is, but that's probably what I admire most about her, is that she refuses to give in to the transplant, the rehab, the resulting strains and difficulty on the rest of her life. And I know it's tough for her sometimes, a lot of times, but she's always positive.
People who have gotten sick, or people who have been through something big, like somebody died who is really important in their lives, or they got really sick and everyone thought they were going to die and they did not. Anyone who's been through something really huge like that inspires me to keep going, inspires me to stay strong, inspires me to keep my courage positive and keep it still there, you know, because it's easy to not look on the positive side. It's really easy for me to fall. The more I surround myself with people like that, the more I am inspired to be strong and courageous.
When you're friends with Allison, the time spent with her is valuable time. I have never ever spent time with her in which I didn't come away learning something from her, from something she said, something she did, a thought that she provoked in my head.
She amazes me every time I see her. The things she says, and the outlook she has is unbelievable.
She's worked hard at understanding who she is and what her situation in life is. She's worked hard at learning the most she can about herself.
It's made her a very strong person. She has thoughts and ideas, I'm sure, that she would have never had if she didn't have this transplant. And to me, every day, is a good day.
There's not a day that goes by, though, that I don't think about that man who gave her his liver. And his liver enables Allison to live her life to the fullest, and she's doing that. She's thankful. I'm thankful. It truly is a gift of life. I get overwhelmed when I think about that gift and what that means to us. And I hope that families of people who donate, realize the enormity of that act with other people. Because Allison would not have made it passed that night had she not gotten a liver. Someone gave me my daughter. I thank that person forever. He lives through Allison, and we honor his memory.